Hello to East everywhere. My name is Michael Berry, and I am a Williams alum, class of 2018. Thank you for joining us today as we kick off this virtual East lifelong learning lecture series with Professor Rowan Ricardo Phillips. On behalf of Williams College Alumni Relations, I would like to welcome you and thank you for joining in the first installment of this series. These 1 hour virtual lectures are scheduled throughout the fall and feature Williams faculty and expert alumni from a variety of academic disciplines speaking on different topics. You can find the recordings of past talks as well as other virtual Williams offerings at alumni.williams.edu/virtual. It is my pleasure to serve as the MC for today's event. On campus, I served as co-president of the Society of the Griffins and captain of the football team. Currently, I'm a WE Band volunteer and a founding member of the Virtual Vanguard. I also co-host the Virtual Vanguard podcast alongside Valerie Oyakilome, class of 2018. The Virtual Vanguard serves to uplift the Black Williams community by providing a platform for its alumni, faculty, students, and staff to discuss prevalent issues within our community and highlight their achievements. This past summer, myself, along with a brilliant group of student and alumni, created this platform in order to foster dialogue and bring our community together during the pandemic. To enjoy views for the Vanguard, subscribe to the Virtual Vanguard on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at the Virtual Vanguard. If you're interested in supporting our collective, feel free to email us at thevirtualvanguard@gmail.com. All links will be provided in the chat. A few reminders before we get started. If you have questions for Professor Phillips, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen at any time during today's talk. We'll have a dedicated time for Q&A at the end, but you can submit your questions as you think of them. Please reserve the chat as a space to engage with the community and share reflections or comments you may have during the discussion. And with that, I would like to introduce today's speaker, the Margaret Bundy Scott Professor of English here at Williams College, Rowan Ricardo Phillips. Professor Phillips is a multi-award-winning poet, author, screenwriter, academic, translator, and journalist. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Paris Review, and other national and international publications. He's the author of 3 books of poetry, 2 books of nonfiction, and a work of translation. His many awards and accolades include the Guggenheim Fellowship and the PEN ESPN Award for Literary Sports Writing. Rowan is also a poetry editor for Public Books, a member of the Creative Council of Aspen Words, and on the faculty of the Creative Writing Program at Princeton University. He teaches courses at Williams like the literature of sports and the making and unmaking of literary tradition. We are honored to have him here with us today to read a selection of his works about this year. Thank you, Professor Phillips.
Well, Michael, thank you very much. What a, I don't know, heartwarming introduction, and it's heartwarming to be here with you now, Michael, as an alum and with all of the alumni who are here. I'm happy to spend this time with you. I hope that you are well, all things considered, that you and your loved ones are safe, and that we can spend a really fruitful hour together in this very strange year, 2020. What I'm going to do is, everything is done differently now, right? Whether you're working or if you have children and you're helping them with their schoolwork, catching up with family, mourning a past one, having a college reunion or a high school reunion. Everything is different now and mediated through this screen, right? Which we can't penetrate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read, but I'm also going to share with you what I'm reading. Just in the same way and in the spirit of Michael sharing with you about the wonderful virtual Vanguard that he has going on, I'm going to share with you some very, very, very new work. I know that when you are in school, you get work that ranges from antiquity to the contemporary. Well, I'm as contemporary as it gets, because what I'm going to read to you is something that has not come out yet in print, but will be in the Sunday New York Times magazine, and actually is live now. It's just went live online. Here you have it. Let's see. There it is. This is the text that I'm going to be reading. This is funny for people who watch this recording because they haven't received it, but I've just sent the link to my feature in the New York Times Magazine. It's called Looking Back on Baseball's Silent Season. I'm going to read two, if we have time, three pieces that merge my interests, which are human thought, how we live, human society, art, beauty, and contests, particularly sport. So feel free to read along with me if you want to open the link, or if you'd just like to sit back and watch me on a screen read, that's fine as well. Looking back on baseball's silent season. Two words that have been on my mind constantly these recent months are room tone. Room tone is the sound a space makes when there is no other sound but the sound of the space itself. The subtle sounds in a high-ceilinged room with brick walls and wide windows are different from those of a small room with wood-paneled walls and narrow windows, or those of the upper deck of a completely empty stadium, or those of the lower deck of a completely empty stadium. Every space has a tone. Every space speaks. Conjuring room tone is essential for film and television production. After a scene of dialogue, someone on set asks for silence so that the room tone can be recorded. This sound becomes the baseline atmosphere of the scene and is mixed into it in order to create a sonic commonality, a unified field. When room tone is lost, things seem less real. An unacknowledged or unrecognized intrusion interrupts the smoothness of life. When we stop and heed the room tone, we cede the primacy of our voices to the sound of the space we inhabit. We often need what we don't know we need, and silence is no exception. Silence invites the room tone from the background to the foreground. It emerges like the sun from behind a cloud, bringing with it a sense of contiguous reality that smooths over the gaps. This is not always pleasant. When Macbeth's chief servant, Satan, returns from investigating a scream heard off stage, all he says is, "The queen, my lord, is dead." That's it. After all the talking, scheming, and speeches, all the sound and fury, what is left for Macbeth is the silence of that other space and the simple truth of words borne by his faithful lieutenant, who has 5 lines in the entire play, this one being his last. Baseball's empty stadiums bear a similar heavy truth. By design, the game has always been as much about a spectator's privilege to enjoy a few hours outside watching a ball game played in a garden as about the doings on the field. During the season, many players said something to the effect that once they're between the lines, the game is still the same game. But is the game really the same game without onlookers? Soccer and basketball reveal things in that televised silence. How players talk to one another. Baseball players, on the other hand, communicate encoded signals in the seclusion of the dugout, the webbing of a glove covering the mouth, a make-do face mask. How does a sport with so many pauses in it make sense when those pauses reveal a vacuum or worse, artificial noise? After all, an empty seat this year isn't simply the consequence of public health precautions. An empty seat is a consequence of mass death and the threat of mass death. And every single death within that mass death is isolated and horrible. This is what that emptiness means. And this was the room tone of the 2020 Major League Baseball season. A familiar voice from an unfamiliar number left me a message. "I understand that you want to talk to me about baseball during COVID-19. Give me a call." I gave him a call. You never really get the full impact of what it means to have an empty stadium, except when you're sitting there, Dr. Anthony S. Fauci said. On July 23rd, he threw out the ceremonial first pitch of the first game of the baseball season. The Yankees were in town to play his favorite team, the Washington Nationals, last year's World Series champions. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an affair of pomp and circumstance for the teams and the fans, especially super fans like Fauci. But 2020 is playing out in far from normal circumstances. When last seen in action, National Park brimmed with 42,000 noisy fans. Now, on a day that threatened rain, there were 3. Fauci, his wife, and a friend. We're looking around and we're the only people in the stands, he told me. It was so extraordinarily unusual, almost eerie. The game was called after 6 innings because of rain, with the Nationals losing to the Yankees. Juan Soto, Washington's star, wasn't there. He tested positive for COVID-19, and the rest of the 2020 season wouldn't be any kinder to the Nationals. They finished dead last in their division and didn't play a single game before their fans as the reigning champions. As I write this sentence, enough Americans have died of the novel coronavirus to fill Nationals Park 5 times over. Fauci's pitch that day was the most important pitch of the 2020 season. But the less said about the pitch itself, the better. He reared back to throw the baseball toward home and ended up looking instead as if he'd just blown his nose with his right hand and was trying to put the tissue into his left pocket. All the same, Topps made a baseball card commemorating the moment. And it set an all-time print run record. Over 50,000 people have bought the limited edition card. Decked out in a white Nationals jersey and red World Champions mask, a dark glove with snazzy orange highlights on his left hand as the ball floats above his extended right arm. Fauci's eyes following the ball's ill-fated spin. It's actually quite a beautiful shot. You always hear these stories about politicians, Brent Colburn, another committed Nationals fan, said to me. You've heard this about a number of presidents who get invited to throw the first pitch, and they carve time out of their schedule to go back out at the White House or wherever and practice. Colburn is the vice president for communication and public affairs at Princeton, where I teach, and a veteran of many a presidential campaign. Fauci's damp squib of a first pitch was easy fodder for cheap jokes and facile symbolism. He is, after all, the face, the scientific face at least, of America's coronavirus response. Colburn wasn't having any of it. It gives me great confidence that Dr. Fauci hasn't been spending time working on his pitching, he said. The last thing I want is Anthony Fauci practicing his fastball. The Nationals suffered a slow start, just like last year, which began 19 wins, 31 losses, putting their chances of winning the World Series at 1.5%. But they didn't defy the odds. They defiled them. Through one dramatic win after another in the playoffs and a final defeat of the villainous and despised Houston Astros, truly a nihilist's fever dream of a baseball team. The Nationals reminded the country of baseball's ability to captivate the imagination by hitting those fabled American grace notes of perseverance, resilience, and beating the odds in order to rise above their presumed station. From the last pitch of last October, National fans waited to pack the stadium and see something that their franchise, which had been in Washington since 2005 after spending its first 35 years as the Montreal Expos, had never seen: a World Series ceremony in their stadium. It wasn't to be. I would say between 2005 and this year, I made at least 75% of their home openers, Colburn said. Yet this year, he added, is so much less important than most things that people are dealing with right now. But it reminds you why people default to sports metaphors all the time. It's just an easier way to express these things. There's something kind of clean about sports, or easy to understand. Colburn continued. The contrast of what an opening day would have looked like this year versus what it does look like this year kind of sums up a lot of what the country is going through in a bunch of different sectors and parts of the economy, and parts of social and civic society and life. By the time Jacob Blake was shot multiple times in the back by a police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin on August 23rd, the summer had already been stuck in a wretched cycle. Unchecked police violence, protests, police taking on the protesters, repeat. The world had drastically changed from when pitchers and catchers first reported to spring training in February. On the day Fauci took the field, the players and coaches on the Nationals and Yankees came out onto the field and took a knee, though not during the national anthem. On the back of the mound, front and center on the television screen, were visible three letters, not MLB, but BLM, although not for long. By the next game, BLM had been replaced by a sponsor, PNC. On August 26th, as tensions in Kenosha intensified with the appearance of armed white vigilantes from near and far, the players of the NBA's Milwaukee Bucks, sequestered in a bubble set up by the league in Orlando, had seen enough. They, along with the rest of the NBA and the WNBA, refused to play. And as afternoon turned to evening in Wisconsin, something unexpected happened. The Milwaukee Brewers also refused to play. Their scheduled opponent, the Cincinnati Reds, went along with them in solidarity. The Seattle Mariners and San Diego Padres joined the protest. And then the Los Angeles Dodgers and the San Francisco Giants did the same. The Dodgers star Mookie Betts, who is black, had told his teammates that playing just didn't feel right for him, but that they should do what they felt was right. These were the teams that refused to play baseball that evening. 6 out of 30. Matt Kemp of the Colorado Rockies, Jason Hayward of the Chicago Cubs, and Dexter Fowler and Jack Flaherty of the St. Louis Cardinals sat out while their teammates played. If you checked the box scores afterward, it seemed like any other night of baseball when 3 games get rained out. On August 27th, Major League Baseball rescheduled those 3 games as parts of doubleheaders to be played that day. The protests, like the BLM sign on the mound in Washington, had come and gone. And the games, this time all of them, played on again in one empty park after another. When David Price was traded, along with Betts, from the Boston Red Sox to the Los Angeles Dodgers in February, his first thoughts weren't about the Dodgers being one of the best teams in baseball. I was like, man, this is Jackie Robinson, you know? I went to the team that broke the color barrier in baseball, from the last team to have an African-American on their team. For Price, who won the World Series with Boston in 2018 and a Cy Young Award with the Tampa Bay Rays in 2012, the tradition of the black ball player is not merely symbolic, it's a legacy. I fell in love with baseball and the Braves, he said. They had David Justice, Fred McGriff, Terry Pendleton, Andrew Jones, Marquise Grissom. He has more perspective now at age 35 on where young ball players may feel they can and cannot take a stand in baseball. The longer that I've done this, the more comfortable you feel, you know, speaking up. I mean, I know the way that I felt as a young guy in the league. You just don't speak up. Price talks with thoughtful pauses. You're trying to get your footing under you on the field and take care of everything. He's partnered with LeBron James, a top 5 human being ever, Price told me, among others, to form More Than a Vote, a coalition of black athletes and artists. The coalition has turned Dodger Stadium into a voting center for the 2020 election. But Price's efforts for the Dodgers themselves will have to wait until the 2021 season. I drove to LA on July 1st, packed all my stuff, had my car, Had a hotel rented for a month to get through spring training 2.0, Price said. I went to all the testing training stuff, and then I woke up on the morning of the 3rd, and it was just another day of record highs of COVID and riots and everything that was really going on at the time. And I just told myself, I need to be at home with my family. Price, who has a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter, thought about it. Then, this isn't the time for me to be playing baseball. This isn't the time for me to be separated from our family. On July 4th, Price announced that he was opting out of the 2020 season. He went through with me some of the challenges to a baseball player's habits under the rules of conduct outlined for the 2020 season. You know, there's no sunflower seeds in the dugout. I mean, that was like the rule. He went on, no smokeless tobacco, obviously, because that's going to require spitting. You're not to spit on the dugout floor. I certainly saw players spitting on the dugout floor. Obviously, you're still seeing guys spit. You still see high fives. Some teams take the air high five or do the elbows or whatever they came up with, but you still see some teams high fiving. It's tough to get out of that stuff. I'm a big high fiver. I'm a big hugger. When somebody does something real good, I want to give you a big old hug. So, was this season worth playing in a pandemic? It's got to be worth it to different people for different reasons, Price told me. You know, a lot of people are doing this because they think that if they opt out, they won't be able to get a job in baseball next year, you know? Or that they need to go and collect this money because we're in a pandemic. They don't know how long it's going to last, and they don't know how long their professional career will last. Like, guys have to make decisions. And I think that answer will be different for everybody, whether or not this season was worth it. I recalled Fauci's telling me that, quote, sports in general is such an important morale builder in so many different ways for different people, close quote. I recalled him saying that, quote, there would have been something symbolic in baseball being crushed by this pandemic, as opposed to, you can't play the kind of season you'd like to play, but you're still hanging in there. Sort of like almost just symbolically saying, we're still around, you know? Close quote. And I did know. Not about the pandemic, which I don't pretend to know much at all about, but about symbols, my main trade. About these startlingly frank conversations with their telling rises and dips of the voice, the pensive pauses, the occasional spouses or child in the background, the tone of generalization, the tone of deep reflection. Symbols, of course, have their costs as well. Price's ex-teammate and good friend Eduardo Rodriguez was his pick for the American League Cy Young Award winner this year. After a strong end to last season, quote, he was dominating, close quote, spring training this year, Price said. Then he tested positive for the coronavirus and finally tested negative 2 weeks later. And then, Price said, they found out that it messed with his heart. He opted out because he couldn't play anymore this year. And I just hope that it doesn't linger into next year and affect the rest of his life, Price said. The 22-year-old Juan Soto was Washington's best player this year. But he was nowhere near Nationals Park when Fauci set the season in motion with his pitch. The Nationals announced just before the game that Soto had tested positive for COVID. After missing the first 7 games of the season following the diagnosis, Soto would recover and become the youngest player ever to win the National League batting title. His precocious, eye-opening talent left me wondering what it was like now for players even younger, who dream of making a name for themselves in the game. Otis Brown III is a jazz drummer and a Blue Note recording artist. Both of his sons are serious players. We've become a baseball family in every sense of the word, Brown said through laughter. His younger son Josiah is rising up through the rigorous ranking systems and plays for the renowned baseball program of Del Barton School, a private all-boys Catholic school in Morristown, New Jersey. But this summer, instead of crisscrossing the country for tournaments and showcases, Brown trained at home in New Jersey. I'm glad for this little window we had, a sense of normalcy in being able to see some baseball games, his father said. It's meant a lot to us. And then too, to be able to see baseball games in this time, where players are speaking out about social issues. Such a small portion of the league is African-American players, so I, for one, never thought that anything like Black Lives Matter or mentioning George Floyd's name or things of that nature would ever make its way into Major League Baseball. And on the scale like it has now, he continued. You know, where players are like, I'm not gonna play today. And the teammates are like, okay, we're not gonna play today as a team. Mookie Betts speaking out about it. He's probably neck and neck with Trout for the best player in baseball. And him taking a knee in Major League Baseball was unbelievable to me, Brown said. I was just like, I never thought I would see anything like this. It's October. The regular season came and went like a meek note squeezed out of an accordion. I watched games over these short summer months with great sadness. Eventually, I turned the volume off. The cardboard cutouts of fans in the seats behind home plate were strange enough without all the artificial fan noise being pumped through the broadcast with a cold relentlessness that only an algorithm could love. The game seemed diminished without an audience and without sound in a way that other sports simply do not. Everything about baseball that transcends baseball is connected to the crowd. The game's most famous song is Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Casey at the Bat is about Mudville, not Casey. And the best poem on baseball is William Carlos Williams' The Crowd at the Ball Game, which begins, the crowd at the ball game is moved uniformly by a spirit of uselessness, which delights them. One of baseball's most iconic moments is one of stillness, when Lou Gehrig tells the crowd at Yankee Stadium how lucky he was to be standing before them 2 years before ALS would take his life. The glory of Jackie Robinson was that the crowd had to learn to behave itself, get over it, and get on with watching him compete. The question was never whether he was good enough to play with whites. It was whether the whites could get their act together, be a little less racist, and sit in a seat while a black man played baseball. The game changed irrevocably when the crowd changed slightly. And so I ask you again, is the game really the same game without people there to see the free and easy White Sox, the mad scientist Trevor Bauer, the living, breathing fun zone that is Fernando Tatis Jr., the time bandit Nelson Cruz, the endlessly sequestered excellence of Mike Trout? What came of them? In a typical season, the story would have been the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. They were a very good team from start to finish. They lived on the timely home run. They have a stable of fairly anonymous, interchangeable, hard-throwing pitchers. They had a rookie play out of his mind when it mattered most. Entering the playoffs, they had a record that made them one of the favorites, and the name on their jersey made them one of the underdogs. They are contemporary baseball excellence straight from central casting, the output of calculations from an office and grit from minor league fields. They are exciting and dull. And they may have saved Major League Baseball from a nightmare scenario. Because unlike the Nationals, the Houston Astros returned to the playoffs this year. They limped into the postseason with more losses than wins, taking advantage of the fact that the league expanded the playoff format from 5 teams per league to 8. Taking advantage has been the Astros' MO over recent years. In January, Major League Baseball concluded an investigation that found Houston guilty of a sign-stealing scheme during the 2017 season, in which the team ended up winning the World Series. No players were punished. Rumors persisted that the Astros continued to cheat well after the 2017 season, which they have denied. No one, aside from their fans, seemed interested in a redemption tour for a team that never sought redemption. A team that preened and snarled their way to an everlasting ignominy they had worked hard to earn. According to Sports Media Watch, Game 7 of the Astros-Rays ALCS was, and I quote, easily the lowest rated and least watched Game 7 in MLB history. When the Rays outlasted, finally, the Astros, and the Dodgers outlasted, finally, the Atlanta Braves, the stage was set for a final act of the longest, shortest season ever. An East Coast versus West Coast battle set in Arlington, Texas, in front of a spattering of spectators allowed back into the stands. In the end, I didn't only see them, I could hear them from time to time. As the ball soared up into the air after the thwack of the bat, I'd glimpse them and have to remind myself that they were there. By now, I'd turned the volume back on. And sometimes I'd crank it up and listen for the crowd, those sounds betwixt and between the interspersed vacancies and momentary pauses of the game. Maybe, when the camera work allowed, you too saw them on the television and were, as I was, both amazed by and scared for them. Maybe you saw Mookie Betts make it all look so easy from oh so close. Maybe you saw Tampa Bay's radiant Cuban rookie Randy Arozarena in the flesh and realized you'd get to one day say, I was there when. I don't know if this would make you lucky or unlucky. These are the times we live in. What is lucky and what is unlucky hangs in the air. We either catch it or we don't. Ali Smith begins her novel Autumn like so. It was the worst of times. It was the worst of times. Again. And indeed, it is autumn again. One team won, one team lost. The story of baseball in 2020 has ended in Tampa and Los Angeles, but no baseball has been played in either city for a month. Still, people will wait in lines outside Dodger Stadium and Tropicana Field into November. Not for playoff baseball. Baseball, a summer word, won't be what hangs in the air there then. Baseball had come and baseball had gone. The words of the crowds there having changed by then to election, justice, vote. So that's that. And I'm not quite sure that that leaves time to read the next piece I had in mind. So maybe what we can and should do is take questions. I'm happy to take questions for about 20 minutes, or if you prefer, I can read the other piece, but that's going to take maybe 15 minutes or so, and that would only leave 5 minutes. So either way is fine for me, but I'm really happy to field questions, and I really encourage you to use the Q&A to ask questions. Thank you for your time, comment. Well, I mean, someone in the Q&A is saying read the other piece. Now I realize actually, Kate and Layla, that I should have actually had a little poll. But why don't we do the Q&A instead, because the other piece is, it's about 3,000 words or so. So it really wouldn't leave any time for you all. And I really, this is all about connectivity, right? We talk about internet connections and everything, but now that we're living in this situation, this is our form of human connection. And I'm very much here to connect with you. So, well, everyone is saying read the other piece. Okay, well then I will read the other piece, but I will read it fairly quickly. Unless anyone has a question that they would like to. Okay, everyone wants me to read the other piece, so be it. And I will also send you the link to the other piece. The other piece is relevant as well, because that's where the title of this talk comes from, the 2020. And this came out last month. We're still in October, in the wonderful journal VQR, Virginia Quarterly Review. The rhythm of this work is faster, so I think it can go by quicker. Well, thank you for your time. So I think I've just sent it via the chat, so you can also look at that if you'd like to, and I'm just going to jump in. This is the 2020. We were passengers forced to jump into the water when our ship, the 2020, after years of creaking, cracked in half and sank down into the darkness. The ship was long thought to be beautiful, for it gleamed in the sunlight and it gleamed in the moonlight. It throbbed like a beacon, could be seen across great distances. And since it was like a beacon, it was taken for a beacon. But the ship was never beautiful. Where there should have been wood, there was gold, and where there could have been gold, there were guns. It was ill-gotten, falsified, and much like it housed every imaginable person, it also housed every imaginable horror. Yes, in a certain light, it could pass for beautiful, but it was the water that was beautiful. It was the water that was part of the natural course of things. Another natural course of things was the fate of ships that mistook themselves for water, much like our ship had done. It traveled without purpose, aside from the purpose of being itself, which was considered enough of a purpose by both those who claimed to own the ship and those who claimed to steer it. And on it went, without a sail or engine, simply being suggested forward by what was commonly called the will of God, which was as white as the clouds and as clear as the wind. It has been claimed that this God is endless in his power, that he is everywhere. Thus, in being unknown, he is known. Thus, he guides the ship. Therefore, the wreck under our feet is still guided by him. For what he guides never falters, and what he touches never breaks. Some of the people in the water are actually. They had been told this, and so they say this. Our ship spins away from us, but our God is here, and our God is our ship, so we are safe here with him. They yell now over the waves as their mouths fill with water. Some thrash, cough, and sink. Some see the others coughing and sinking, and nevertheless start up with the yelling again. Our ship spins away from us, but our God is here, and our God is our ship, so we are safe here with him. In the distance, the captain clings to a slick chunk of driftwood and can hear them. He doesn't want to hear them and wishes they were dead. He doesn't want to hear anyone and wishes they were all dead. In their death, he reasons he would live. For knowing they had died would surely mean that he had survived. And in surviving, he would be seen as having been right all along. That the ship is the most beautiful ship that there ever was, and is perfect as it is. He will find another ship, like his father did. He is sure of this. He will find another ship, and that ship will pull his ship out of the water, and it will be perfect as it is. And he will set off again through the waters with what survivors are left. And why can't everyone see that and know that that's fine? The ship, after all, had been broken before. It never quite sank, but it had been broken. That was many captains ago, and not this captain's fault at all, this captain thought. Amid the chaos in the water, the most chaos is where the captain is. He thrashes like he's never seen water before. He is at the center of a circle of trusted people who also embraced whatever floats and therefore keeps them afloat. They yell across the water to each other, to the captain, to the sky. Those who yelled, "Our ship spins away from us, but our God is here, and our God is our ship, so we are safe here with him," took the yelling they heard coming from that direction to be the same as what they were yelling. And so they yelled back to it, but louder. Their covered feet keep paddling to keep their heads above the water. Their arms keep parting the water. They are tired, but believe in the salvation and in the purity of it and of the water. That purity came in the form of the freedom of their movement, how they kick and wade, how they hold their children above their heads and above their water and above the water, keeping their watery eyes open for a sign from God or anyone of vague to opaque pigmentation. They refuse the stray life jackets that bob toward them. Freedom is in being able to say no to these things. And they like saying no so much that they say it again and again, as they had seen done on the television or heard done on the radio. Whatever floats by them is greeted by a chorus of no's, so that what's heard in the water above all else is, "No, ship spins away from us. No, God is here, and our God is our no. So we are safe here with no." And when no God comes, they call this God's prophecy fulfilled. "Tell me a story," you said. And here I am, telling you a story. Remember that you all were on a ship, and that ship snapped in half. I could tell you what to believe and not to believe about how that happened. I could tell you how to tread water for days, how to let the salt water enter and swill around on your tongue until the salt water is gone and you can swallow it. How to dive under the surface with your eyes open to catch a glimpse of the ship, if only to remind yourself that there really was once a ship under your feet. And because there once was a ship under your feet, you can argue that you used to walk on water. The ship did not snap in half because you had walked on water. The ship snapped in half because it thought that it walked on water, which was God's plan, as the ship was in the image of his Son. And as God sacrificed his only Son, he would also sacrifice his only ship. That there were many other ships seen in the water, and that the ship balanced on the surface of the water due to basic science and craft work. This was a dissenting opinion reserved for specific sections of the ship. But let's not talk about that. "Tell me a story," you said. "Tell me about the current state of things," you said. And so here I am, telling you a story about the current state of things. Forget that there is no land in sight. Forget the harbor lights you think you see far off in the horizon's fiery zone. And yes, I see them too. Those are other ships, and they have heard of us, and they will have nothing to do with us. And after so many months now like this, making broken figure eights in the water, watching, listening, waiting, I am limited in my imagination. I can only tell you what I see and what I hear. Nonsense, protests, contemplations, and drowning, drowning, drowning. I have swum as far from here as I can go and seen other ships, and they have not sunk. I saw a ship cracked open like an egg, but then pulled back together and fused by a chain of people stretching from one side of the ship to the other and simply refusing to let go. Perhaps we could have done that. It is summer and the water is warm, and we have killed most of the predators for food or distraction, so we should be able to survive like this for a while. We are strong, dumb, and resilient. Someone will do a head count so we know what we number, and someone will ask the captain what we do next and come back with his answer. Better to send an interpreter, since the captain speaks in what can only be called riddles, if we assume that the captain is sane and capable and cares. But you would be right to ask whether we need to listen to the captain as there is no longer a ship. Though the captain says there is indeed still a ship, and that it will be hoisted up from the deep and ready to go again by fall. Yes, he said that. You asked me to tell you a story, and I assume you want facts in it. The sun is God, and the ship on the ocean floor is God. Therefore, the attraction of the sun and the ship will lift the ship back up to the surface of the water. This is his fact. His circle, no matter how well or poorly one of them swims, spins around him like a wheel circling its focus, yelling his fact so that all of us stranded here at sea can hear it. The yell being how they think to subdue nature, for as you yell, you are heard, and if you are heard, you are alive. It's that simple. The natural thing now would be to be dead, would it not? But yelling, after all that has happened, is proof that we are here, is it not? Yelling turns fact into feeling. The people who yelled about God and the ship feel this way now. And they heard it being yelled from the captain's spinning circle. So it must be so. And so now they yell, the sun is God and the ship is God, and we shall meet both in the middle. I am tired of being told to pity them. No ship is unstoried, and our ship was not without its fill of them. Yet I have felt compelled to tell you about the water, the black jade of it, that it undulated just above and just below the eyes, like when you stand a sheet's length away from your mother and shake the sheet before walking toward her so she can fold it. That it blackens like dark matter in the night when the mist rises and clouds the eyes and you can hear chants from the other sides of the ship. That it shimmers like the feathers on a peacock's neck. The water, its acute changes that over the span of a day don't seem like changes at all, but rather just itself. I worry about all of us becoming like that. Change confused for simply itself. Changed unrecognized in a tightening gyre of sound and sound alone. But what about the ship, you ask? What happened to the ship? It always had its problems, but why did it finally come apart? Did it hit something? The answer is natural history. Look up. See that bird circling overhead, all red on one half of its body and all white on the other? That's called a hermaphrodite cardinal. There is no reason it should be here, and yet here it is. Do what you can to drown out all the other noise. Listen to it sing. I have been listening to it and little else for months now. I have followed it miles from the shipwreck and have returned when it has returned. It refuses to leave and refuses to land. I never saw it before the ship went down, but I had heard something in the air that I know now was it. A man I didn't know and yet knew told me what I heard. He was obsessed with birds and could name them by what song they sang. Some storytellers rise late in the day and tell stories until late in the night. I am a storyteller who rises early in the morning when the sky is that rare lilac beige. That would be when I would see him on the deck, binoculars around his neck, thick glasses on his face, a Star Trek t-shirt, and a look on his face that would say, I am listening. And not wanting to bother him, I would stay and listen too for the oriole and the woodpecker, the red-winged blackbird, and the black-capped chickadee. I would follow him, saying little to him, as to neither disturb him nor scare away the birds. He would say nothing to me, but he would sing to the birds. They would arrive, sing, and leave, seemingly pause to have left me rooted there, both the birds and the man, I mean. The ship, as always, was going nowhere, but this man had somewhere to be. He would be in those moments not on that stagnant ship, but where the birds had been. Seeing this man was like looking into a mirror. His blackness, his height, his sense of elusiveness, his stolid reality in an abstract world. One day a few months ago, he simply said one word, and with that one word, the ship jumped. The water was smooth and the sky was clear, but the ship caught air and then landed again and it had changed. It was as though it had leaped through time. The gold on the ship had turned to verdigris, and the guns were now pointed back at the ship itself. Have you ever heard the gray catbird? Related to the mockingbirds and thrashers, it is about the size of two small fists. I had learned from the man by watching them. All of the successes and frustrations in the world can be reduced to a moment of silent listening. I would watch him and watch him being watched and watch him watch himself being watched, all while he listened, and I too tried to listen as he listened. The gray catbird. I had never seen one until that morning. They tend to chill in the bush and sing from there. I remembered my mother's reprimand when I tried to step onto the deck, my hair and clothes, that people would think I was from the bush, though there were no bushes on the ship. The ship that morning had been chorusing in the sun, bending light around it like a halo, but a hazy gray set in for the day. He told me to be quiet. This is the first time he'd ever said anything to me. I thought I hadn't said a word. Shh, he said to me again, as though the presence itself was too loud. Shh. Silence. Hey, Eric! Hey, Eric! The gray catbird started to sing. Hey, Eric! Hey, Eric! Is that your name? Shh! Hey, Eric! 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 Eric! Hey, 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 Eric! And then he simply said, no. This is when the ship caught air, launching itself like a cat from certainty to uncertainty. And as it touched down again, first the bow, then the stern, which lifted the bow before it crashed down again, and the sound of the seas surge against the side of the ship swelled in all of our ears. I swear to you, the water sounded like it was saying, George, George, George. And that's the 2020. So thank you for your patience and for wanting to hear the 2020 as well. What I'd love to do is, we have 4 minutes to 1, and I'm happy to stay a few minutes after if any of you have any questions. You have the Q&A, but I'm really happy to take on any questions that you might have, if you have any. And yes, it is a great year with Louise Glück winning the Nobel. Very well deserved. Here's a question. You seem to write a lot about sounds and silence. Can you talk a bit about that? Sure, thanks, Leslie. So the job of a writer is to listen, to read a lot, read more than he, she, or they writes, and to listen for, as Wallace Stevens put it, the nothing that is not there and the nothing that is. Just like in sports or my sports writing, I'm not interested as much in results, right? You know what happened after an event has happened, and especially in this day and age, there's so many ways to get the result. So it's more about the sensibility of the thing, how silence feels to us, and how we make sense of it. Rick, is there hope? Yes, there's hope. There's always hope. I think that we live in a world that encourages us not to ask that question, but rather to be busy with our other things and our worries and anxieties and our aspirations and ambitions. But it's good to pause and ask that question and not to assume that there is. But yes, there is hope. I'm the strangest type of born and raised New Yorker. I'm a devout optimist. So yes, I think there's certainly hope. Have I tried, from Pierce, Quaker meeting for its silence? Well, I am a proud alum of Swarthmore College, so I'm quite familiar with Quaker meetings and Quaker practice. So yes. Cindy, when you write, do you have a muse? Are you in a kind of reverie when you write? Well, my muse is most certainly my wife. She keeps me on my feet. But Yeats, I think, put it wonderfully in a poem called Vacillation, 20 seconds more or less, it was so great my happiness that I was blessed and could bless. And so, yeah, you feel it, particularly when you're writing well, but a lot of writing that comes out is not going to be particularly good, or your best writing. You keep your notebook and you plug away. But some of it is romantic and beautiful and effervescent and a reverie, but some of it is also the work of making something. Paul, room noise in MLB stadiums was drowned out by artificial noise, often by an unpleasant howling. Did we lose something by not simply having silence in the ballparks? I think so, certainly. And I think that the point of the sound was to have us not think about that and not exist in that eeriness. But Sean Doolittle, a relief pitcher for the Nationals, put it marvelously when he said that sports is the reward of a functioning society, and our society is not functioning on all cylinders at this point. And so even if there was sports, I think it would have been helpful and telling to let the sounds of those stadiums be as they were. I love watching football matches, soccer matches that don't pump in the artificial noise, and you can kind of like take in the voices and the thwack of the ball. I think that that's important and instructive. John, when did you start writing the story about the baseball season, and how long did it take you? So my editor at the Times Magazine asked me in July, I think mid-July, to take this on. And so the writing itself, you're always writing, John, before you start writing, but I was watching from the first pitch, right? So Fauci threw, but the writing itself, 8 days ago or so. I mean, that's separate from my notes. I've been taking notes. I did many hours of interviews with people, some unfortunately who didn't get in here, but for instance, Otis Brown, the Blue Note drummer, I had 50 pages of transcribed interviews with him, and David Price as well, and Dr. Fauci. So there's the writing, and there's the note-taking and transcribing and all of that, so. Well, thank you, Mario, for being here. How do I balance time between Williams and Princeton? I don't know, Mario, you tell me. But I do. Martin, your words have political overtones. How politically active are you, or do you let the words act for you? Well, all words have political overtones. There's no such thing as a non-political word. Case in point, all Blacks, particularly enslaved Blacks in this country, were forbidden from writing, and any whites who taught them to read or write were going to face severe punishment from the rule of law. So I think it's best to not think about anything being apolitical versus political. And I don't consider them to be overtones. They're just tones, Sport is playing now for political reasons. There's college sports. There's not sports at Princeton or Williams, but there is sports in the SEC for a reason, and that's political. How politically active am I? I'm politically active, but I don't have a measure. I don't have a measurement for it. I just, James Baldwin once said, though I don't think he wrote this down, action is the only testament to moral behavior. So you act, but for the writer also you write, and they're separate things, I think. Adrian, you speak of baseball in the context of a contest. Your piece awakened to me how politics can penetrate the field. In your eyes, how does the nature of baseball contests differ with that of the political contest? Well, baseball is much more persuasive than politics, right? I mean, there's a moment when we don't think about someone's political leanings when they're throwing a pitch or hitting a baseball. And in that way, it can at its best be a bridge towards understanding one another. It's what happens after the effects, or how you couch everything. So, Yankee Stadium having God Bless America and tributes to the police and all of this, those are political gestures and socio-political gestures. But the baseball in and of itself is not their ideological gestures, I think. But baseball is always tied up to late 19th century America, right? I mean, who has time to sit and watch people in white run around in grass for an undetermined amount of time? It's about leisure and celebrating the ability to have leisure um, more than anything else, I think. How did I start to get noticed by the Times so they would publish my work? Writing. You know, I've been writing for a while. I've covered the 2014 World Cup for the Paris Review and covered the 2016 NBA season for the Paris Review, and wrote a book on the 2017 year in tennis and the men's tour called The Circuit, which was published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux, that I'd recommend to you. And you know, what a good editor does is they're attracted to good writing, you know, and I've been fortunate in that sense, but nothing more than that, just doing the work and finding my way to good editors. I've been lucky in that sense. So I can take one more question, and I guess I'll take Melissa. Melissa, you're asking, how are you finding connection with your students this semester? How are you engaging with or taking care of one another as you are isolated in your myriad varied room noises? It's a wonderful question to end on. We're connecting, you know, I mean, what I do is I have in my syllabus a note that I give to my students that I share with them, and it's 6 basic rules. The first one is that we remember we are not working from home or kind of working in isolation. We're working through a international crisis, a global pandemic, and that within the context of that, we will do the best that we can, and that we shouldn't judge ourselves from how we cope or how we see other people cope, or presume that others are coping in one way, but should another, or vice versa. And we've fallen down this rabbit hole together. And we just try to find a common, you know, so a common space by which we can be together. And that involves a lot of empathy. And I know in my literature sports course, I start with the first 5 minutes we talk about, you know, anything that interests us regarding, you know, sports and the larger world. And, you know, that way we get to talk about our favorite teams or where we're from or whether we're practicing or not. And that's a good way to oxygenate the space and bring our lives and into it and care for one another. First with casual talk and then into the work of reading and writing. And the students have been really marvelous, and you know, I'm heartened by them. I actually have an alum in the class, the tennis coach, Dan Greenberg, who's been a wonderful participant in the class. He was an English major when he was here. I think he's class of '08. And one of his students from the tennis team is also in the class, and there's just wonderful dynamics. This is a marvelous place. It's really given me wings being here, and you know, there's tremendous synergy. I feel very much at home here. So it's good. I wish I could be here longer, but I'm happy for the time that I have here. So thank you so much for your questions. And please feel free to check me out either on Twitter at Rowan Ricardo or on Instagram, or you can just follow my work at my website, which is www.rowanricardophillips.com. But I'm going to bid you adieu with gratitude and hope that you stay well and safe, and pass the virtual mic over to Michael for the outro.
Delay there. Professor Phillips, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule here to share your words and share the space with us. I'll definitely say that that's been a great way to kick off the day for me personally, and I think I speak for everybody on the call here that yeah, those were 2 amazing pieces, and you know, just thank you for dedicating your time to educating us, really. And then to everybody who attended the lecture, I would like to just remind you that this lecture, as well as others, can be found on alumni.williams.edu/virtual. And we hope to see you on November 10th for Professor Jasmine Smith's presentation. She's class of 2003, and she will be speaking about her new book, Imagining the Mulatto. Thanks for joining us, and have a great Thursday.